Week 5 of the story. I want to catch us up real quickly in 30 seconds or less. After God created the heavens and the earth and everything that there is with the desire to do life with His people, people turned their backs on God. Sin entered the scenario and shattered the relationship between people and God. God decided to restore that relationship with us through the building of a nation, a new nation, beginning with Abraham and Sarah. Their descendants eventually ended up in Egypt, first flourishing and then becoming slaves. And finally, God, working through the man named Moses, led them out of slavery in Egypt on their way to the promised land. And that's where we pick up today. Was that less than 30 seconds? Yeah, okay. I thought to myself, all right, you're going to summarize, about 4 hours of preaching in 30 seconds. I don't know if it happens. I did it. Okay, so chapter 5. The Hebrew people had now been on the move for 3 months, our text says. And they are in the Sinai Peninsula, in that area between Egypt and Israel, current Egypt and Israel. There they are. They come to a mountain. We call it the Mount Sinai. And there God calls Moses up the mountain and gave him the 10 Commandments. Now that's typically what we want to focus on, but I want to tell you there's so much more going on here than just the 10 Commandments, the do's and the do-nots. In this chapter, we come across a word several times. And that word is covenant. Covenant. And that's the bigger picture of what's going on. Not just the 10 Commandments, but covenant. And that's what I want to focus on with you today. Now, at the risk of boring you to death, I'm going to get just a little bit academic. It was in 1931 when archaeologists found stone tablets in Turkey. They weren't the 10 Commandments. But what they were covenants from a people in antiquity, or from antiquity, a people called the Hittites. And just to put this in some biblical connection, in Genesis chapter 23, we learn that Abraham bought a field and a cave for burial from Ephron the Hittite. So, it's at least biblical. On these stones, on these tablets, archaeologists discovered 2 kinds of covenants that were made in antiquity. The first kind of covenant would be between 2 kings, if you will, of relatively equal rank. The second kind of covenant is between a king, a big guy, powerful king, and a not so powerful king, like the king of a nation that the big king had invaded and occupied. That's the covenant I want to think about with you. That covenant is between a suzerain, the big dude, and a vassal, the vassal state. All right, and there are 6 parts to it. I'm almost done with the academic part, okay? There are 6 parts to this kind of covenant. 1, there is the preamble in which the king introduces himself. The big king introduces himself to the little king. I am the great king so-and-so from such and such a place. The second part is called the historical prologue, in which the king, the big king, tells the little king all that he has already done. I am the big king who has protected you and fed you and built infrastructure for you. The third part is called the stipulations, where the big king says, here's who I am, here's what I've done, therefore you shall do this in response to all that I've done and who I am. Moving on, there are 3 more parts, and I'm not going to focus on as much today, but there are 3 more parts. This was written down and was deposited with the gods of the respective kings. It would need to be reread, and if you followed the stipulations laid out in part 3, you would experience blessing. If you did not follow those stipulations, you would experience consequences. Now, you might know what I'm doing here. You might sense where I'm going with this. The giving of the 10 Commandments are the stipulations, just one part of this broader covenant that God made with God's people. And we've got to look at this broader covenant if we want to grasp what's really going on in chapter 5 of the story. So if you have your storybook, and I'm trying to get good Lutherans used to carrying a book with them, and it's like herding cats, because we don't think that the Bible's the Bible. It appears magically on the screen, or it's printed on a bulletin in front of us. If you have your storybook, please open to page 61. Those of you who want to rather grab the Pew edition of the Bible, it's Exodus chapter 20. I'm going to be right under the italics in the story. It begins like this. The giving of the 10 Commandments. I am the Lord your God. If you own the book that's in your hand, I guess I'm talking to one or two people here. If you own the book that's in your hand, bring your storybook with you every week, please. Right above I am the Lord your God, write preamble. It's God telling people who He is. I am the Lord your God. And do you notice that the word Lord, L-O-R-D, is all in caps? That brings us back to last week, chapter 4 of the story. Whenever Lord is all caps, it's Yahweh. I am Yahweh, your God. When the world says no way, we say, Yahweh. Oh, you remembered. Oh, that warms my heart. That's the preamble. I am Yahweh, your God. Part 2, we said, was the historical prologue. All the things that God has already done for us, who has brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. That's the historical prologue, what God has already done. If you own the book, I'm talking to one or two people. If you own the book in your hands, write historical prologue above that. Prologue. P-R-O-L-O-G-U-E. I'm not a very good speller. I had to write it here and copy it from someplace. I am the Lord your God who's already done this. And now come the stipulations, part 3. Here's what you're to do. Here's how you are to respond to what I've already done for you. If you own the book that's in your hands, or the book that's going to be in your hands next week, write stipulations or rules. It's part 3 of the covenant. No other gods. Don't use my name meaninglessly. Remember the Sabbath. Honor your parents. No adultery, no stealing, no murder, no lying, and no coveting. That's what God expects of God's covenant people. Now, the other 3 parts of the covenant are also found in the Bible, not in our reading today. But they can be found, and if you want to talk to me sometime, we can. But my point here is that we usually focus on the rules, the do's and the don'ts, the thou shalt and the thou shalt not, and we miss what I would argue is the good news, that the rules are actually set within the context of this covenant. I am already the Lord your God. And by extension, you are already my people. And they haven't done anything yet. They haven't even tried to keep the rules. The rules haven't even been given yet. And God says, you're already my people, and I am already your God. And more so than that, I've already provided for you. I've protected you, I've led you, I've fed you, I've freed you from slavery. And He's done all of that before these folks can even follow rules. They didn't earn being God's people. They didn't deserve being God's people. They didn't merit being God's people. You don't have to be good enough for that. God says, I chose you before you even had an inkling of choosing me. before you can even think about loving me. But now, because of who I am and what I've already done for you, therefore, this is how I want you to live. Here are my expectations, my commandments, and like the Hittite covenant form, if you follow them, you will experience blessing. And if you don't follow them, you will experience consequences. Several years ago, Salem ran a course called the Alpha Course, and I think we did 5 sessions of it. It's a practical introduction to the Christian faith. Nicky Gumbel is the developer of the Alpha Course. He's an Episcopalian priest at Holy Trinity, Brompton in London. How's that for an introduction? Anyways, one of his stories that he tells when he's talking about the commandments has to do with him coming upon a soccer field. One of his kids was going to play soccer. They call it football over there, of course, but play soccer. And the refs didn't show up, and the coaches didn't show up, and so Nicky Gumbel decided that, well, he got drafted to take care of things. There's a problem, though. He didn't really understand the rules of the game. It'd be like me trying to coach or ref volleyball. Not beach volleyball or a pickup game of volleyball, but like high school volleyball or collegiate volleyball. They got all these rules. I don't know the rules, like who can stand where, when, and when you can move, and who can hit and who can't. All right, so Nicky Gumbel's kind of like that with soccer. And he gets the kids out there and he sets up some boundaries that they were wrong. He doesn't know where the kids are supposed to stand, what they can or cannot do, what should be called as a penalty, but he started them playing, and it was absolute chaos. And beyond that, the kids were getting hurt because he didn't know when to call a penalty or not. Well, as luck would have it, eventually someone who knew better, I think it was the real ref, showed up and set up the field with the proper boundaries, put these kids, these youngsters, where they actually belonged in their positions, told them where they could go when, and called penalties and told the kids what would result in a penalty. And you know what? Those kids had the game of their life, the time of their life. They enjoyed playing soccer much more so with rules than without rules. When God gave the commandments, the stipulations of the covenant, He did so with the intentions that you and I might experience blessing and a safe life, an abundant life. And that theme carries through to the New Testament when Jesus said, I have come that you might have life and have it what? Abundantly. Yes. Yes. But it's more than just us having abundant life. It's a call to the people of Israel and to the church of Jesus Christ today to be different. To be different than those who do not know Yahweh. To be different than those who do not know Jesus. So that when others see us, they catch a glimpse of God. This has been a consistent theme. So, once again, the two of you that actually have your books, turn to page 59 in the story. Or for those of you who want to look in the Bible, I'm in Exodus chapter 19, verses 5 and 6. Exodus 19, verses 5 and 6. Back in the story, second full paragraph, in the middle of that, if you own the book, the two of you, underline this. God says, now if you obey me fully and keep my covenant, then out of all nations you will be my treasured possession. Although the whole earth is mine, you will be for me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. Now circle the word holy. Holy. Holy literally means set apart. It's what we are called to be, set apart, different. marching to the beat of a different drummer. When I drive, I try to make best use of my time. I don't necessarily listen to only radio just to have something to listen to or argue with, but I also listen to podcasts. Podcasts from the computer, you download them into your gizmo, and okay. One of the podcasts that I've listened to is of a pastor by the name of Craig Groeschel of lifechurch.tv. Kind of a hip and trendy place. Anyways, I listened to a sermon series of his, which he then developed into a book, both of which had the title Weird. Weird. And the premise in this book is that you and I are called to be weird. And some of you might think, you're fitting the bill, Dave. We're called to be weird. We're called to be different. And the world, when they look at us in being different, might think we are weird. We're called to be in the world, but not of the world. That's weird. We're called to radical generosity with all that we have. Man, that's weird. When we're struck on the cheek, we're to turn the other cheek. Oh, come on. That's weird. We're called to share all that we have. That's weird. We're called to serve other people and think about other people and put them in front of us. That's weird. We're called to practice radical hospitality. That's weird. We're called to be weird, Groeschel says, because normal isn't working. Normal leaves us wanting. Normal leaves us empty. Normal leaves us still wandering through a spiritual wilderness. So let me ask you, are you living this weird life? Are you living in such a way as a follower of Jesus that your life looks different than people who do not follow Jesus? Are you living your life weirdly according to these 10 commandments? Oh, come on. Don't take the name of the Lord your God in vain. I mean, one of the most common things on the internet is OMG. No adultery? Oh, come on. What century are you living in? We're called to be weird. Are you living weirdly? Simply differently or set apart. That's what I'm talking about here. We are called to be different. We are also called to be set apart by God for the sake of the other. Same page 59, same sentence that you underlined, the two of you. Circle the word priests. Priests. God says to his nation, you are a kingdom of priests. Now, that doesn't mean they or we are all called to be ordained as a priest or a pastor. I can't even imagine how boring of a world that would be. But a priest in this context is someone who handles sacred things and goes to God on behalf of others and to others on behalf of God. So what's sacred? God says in that sentence you underlined that the whole earth is mine, which makes it sacred. Everything that we have, everything that has been created is sacred, and we're to handle it all as though it were sacred. It is. And we are to use our lives as priests now, all of us, serving God by serving others. That's what the covenant calls us to. It was God's call to Israel, and it's our call as well. In the New Testament, we're going to make this New Testament-ish-y, if that's a word. It's not. 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 9 says this, of Christians. But you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation. That's that set apart part. God's special possession, that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness and into the glorious light. But not so that we can be God's people, but because we are God's people. That's the order of the covenant. The stipulations are only after God says, I choose you. You are mine. Therefore, you shall act in such and such a way. You know, we get that order messed up all the time. We say we got to keep these commandments and all the 613 commandments. You thought there was only 10. But we try to keep these commandments so that we can be good enough for God, so that we can please God. So that God will say, oh, yes, good boy, pat you on the head. Now you get your ticket to heaven. It's not what the commandments were for. It's all about grace. God's grace. God chooses you first, provides for you first, and says, now act this way. So that others might see. So that others might be drawn to me. Are you doing that? Are you doing that? You know, the same is true in the New Testament. We talk about, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. Jesus' whole life, ministry, death, resurrection, and ascension is a rescue event. And our call is to live our lives in response to that rescue event with lives of holy service. So my call to you today is that you be different. That you be weird according to the world's ways of looking at you anyways, and us. And yet do so in a way that you experience blessing and that others experience blessing as well. And let's remember, it starts with God's amazing grace. And that's what we're going to sing now. Amazing grace. I invite you to stand, and later during the offering, in just a few moments, is this the offering one? The choir's going to sing about amazing grace too. It's not by accident. It's all about God's grace. Let's stand and sing I thought it was 779 actually. What is it?